Hi there, I want to add this into the beginning of the video because there's a few things I want to say. One of them is just to warn you that you're going to see a lot of Chris Watts' face in this video because a lot of the things that I'm saying I've added in since filming. This was originally part of the last video of part 5, but it just went on for quite a long time and I thought that was quite a lot to ask of people to concentrate on all of these details for about 45 minutes, so I took it off and I've made it into a separate video. But a lot of the time when I'm talking it's just my voice, there's no filming and so there's just Chris Watts' face that you're going to be looking at for quite a long time. So I'm sorry about that. Another thing I wanted to mention is that lots of people are giving their opinions of what they think happened in the comment section, which is exactly what I want people to feel able to do. I want everyone to respect that different people are going to have different opinions about this. But I want to respond anyway to a couple of things though that have been said, because I've realised that I haven't covered them in my videos so far. So one of them is about the blanket that was used, or that I think was used to smother the children, because some people think that one of the reasons they think that the murders didn't happen as Chris Watts is saying they did is because the autopsy results don't show fibres in the girls' bodies, and often if somebody's smothered with a material, some fibres from that material will end up in the person's lungs. But in response to this, I want to let people know that according to the people who conduct autopsies, this is not conclusive evidence that the girls weren't smothered. You don't always get these fibres. So the fact there weren't those fibres doesn't prove that they weren't smothered with a blanket. And on the note as well of the blankets, there was a blanket that was found that was originally put in the garage, a pink blanket, and there was also a blanket that was in the house. These blankets weren't the ones that Chris Watts talks about as the one that he used to smother them with. And so that one was a blue one that was a different design to the one that was found in the house. I know that Chris Watts on his way back to the house dumped off some of his clothes, and I don't know if he also dumped the blanket here. That's something I've wondered about, but I don't know if they ever found the clothes that he dumped off. I think he said that the blanket was left at the site, but that may be that because he did dump the sheet there, that he may have forgotten what exactly he left there and what he got rid of. So that's my interpretation of how what he says doesn't fit with the fact the blanket isn't there. So another thing that I wanted to address is that people have said, when I stop talking about Chris Watts, is that it? There have been people who've said, are you still going to make videos? So I want to let you know that yes, I am. I'm still going to make videos. I'm going to look at different people, different narcissists, different examples of narcissistic behaviours. The next person I'm going to be looking at is Patrick Frazee, and the way he has behaved towards girlfriends, and what we can do with that, how we can use that to understand narcissism better. And I'm going to continue the series that has only just begun, which was Weapons of a Narcissist, looking at the different things narcissists do that can be abusive. That was sort of put on hold for a while because there was so much more information coming out about Chris Watts. So yeah, the answer to that is yes. I hope you'll keep watching. I hope people will keep subscribing. On the note of subscriptions, I'm really excited that there's now 15,000 subscribers as of today. I hope there will still be 15,000 subscribers after people have watched this video and they won't sort of start dropping off. So I want to thank you all my subscribers. I actually feel quite emotional saying this because I'm so touched by so many of the comments a lot of you leave that are so supportive, and just to hear how these videos have been helping you, it really is such a good feeling, you know, to know that. So thank you so much for your amazing support. I didn't expect this channel to grow anywhere near so fast. You know, it only started in sort of late December. So thank you again so much for that.
And I think you said earlier that you were so angry at Shanann or whatever that you were gonna, you know, anyone in your path of destruction or whatever was gonna get it. Basically, kind of is what kind of made it sound like. I'm not saying that exactly right, but why were you so angry at Shanann?
I don't know if it was just because of separating me and my family, pretty much. Because, I mean, it happened at the wedding. Like, that's the reason they didn't come to the wedding. I mean, I blew up at my family to a point where I said some horrible things to them back in 2012 that I pretty much told my family that, I don't need them anymore. Because I said, I cussed my mom out. I did all this kind of stuff. I never thought, and I don't know if it was just like Shanann coaching me on to do it, or if it was just like rage that was like I'd never seen before.
I think it's interesting that Chris Watts says this, partly because he is saying that it might be Shanann's fault, that she may have been coaching him to behave like that. And that, and he says at first that she separated him from his family. So he's giving her a lot of power here and a lot of responsibility for his own actions. This is very typical of him. He never takes responsibility for anything. So, it's not surprising. Another thing he's doing here is he's telling us about how he has shown rage towards his family. And that's quite an important point, because later on he says something very different. He says this.
But I let it get to a point where I've never been angry before. And this was like the epitome of being angry.
Yeah.
The epitome of like showing a rage, the epitome of like losing your mind.
Remember before, when he was talking about the way he was towards his parents, he'd said this.
I don't know if it was just like Shanann coaching me on to do it, or if it was just like rage that was like I'd never seen before.
He also talked about another time when he had slammed the door in front of Shanann, when she had been upset that he was texting some lady. I don't know who that was. He doesn't explain to us, but he does mention at another point in this interview that he had that this had been a one-off expression of rage as well. There can't have been 3 times that he only showed his rage once, so this makes me wonder how many more times his rage would have come out during his relationship with Shanann. The way Chris Watts talks about behaving with his parents is an example of a discard that's happened in his past. This time to his family, the way that he was so easily able to get rid of them when he had another source of supply in Shanann. We've seen how easily he discarded Shanann and his children when he had another source of supply, and in the same way he discarded his parents when he married Shanann. I've talked about the way that a narcissist will discard the person they're abusing in previous videos about Chris Watts, and I've also made a video called Nice 1 minute, nasty the next, the cycle of abuse. And in that video I talk about how the discard is part of the cycle of abuse. So there's the love bombing or the idealization phase where the narcissist behaves like someone is the most amazing person ever and puts them on a pedestal. Then there's the devaluation phase, which can happen in all sorts of ways. And then there's the discard. And at the end of a relationship, the discard becomes the final discard. At other points in the relationship, narcissists may discard people, but they don't really mean it because they haven't found another source of supply, so they'll still stick with that person. Every time he's asked a question that would involve him taking responsibility for himself and facing up to the horror of what he's done, he always gives the same response.
But I guess, I mean, like, did you could have done it before you guys left.
I don't.
And not had him, alive in the backseat. They could have been with Shanann in the backseat.
I didn't think about anything really, like, as far as, like, how everything was going to happen. I don't know, like, why it happened. Like, why I left everything out there in the field and why, like, all this stuff. Like, just, none of this makes sense.
People are talking about how crazy it was that he left all of this stuff at the burial site, and why would he be giving himself away like that? And I think he's using this as an opportunity to look like he wasn't in his right mind and he didn't know what he was doing.
But to Tammy's point, did you think that they might be coming back, or did you know they wouldn't be coming back?
No, the whole trip out there, I mean, it was like I was on, like I wasn't thinking. It was like, in my mind right now, I'm thinking back, I'm hoping that I wasn't coherent enough to make that decision to where I knew I was going to kill my girls.
In my video called Cracks in the Mask, I talked about one of the police interviews with Chris Watts and analysed what I thought was going on. And now there's quite a good example here of one of the stories he came up with during that interview. And it really shows us just how easy it is for Chris Watts to just come up with a whole story and to convince the people around him, even detectives.
I don't know where that picture was from because I've never seen that picture.
The one we showed you? Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah, I've never seen Cece in that dress before.
Really? We talked a lot about that dress.
Yeah.
Is that just
and you were saying,
making it up?
I never saw her in that dress.
You were even telling us when she last wore the dress and the boots.
Not that dress.
Those are her favorite winter boots, and she wears them all
winter
summer.
Boots. Winter boots, yeah, but that white dress was a little different. I've never seen that picture.
No, because you talked about buttoning it up. You said, I remember because she just wore it the other day and I had to button up the back. And
must have been a different dress, but not that one.
Huh.
That picture, was that in North Carolina or was that?
I don't know where the
Pulled
picture
it
came
off
from.
of Facebook, Shannon's Facebook.
So maybe it was while you weren't there or something?
Might have been, yeah.
Because you don't recall that, huh?
So there's a lot of pictures I guess I didn't see when they were in North Carolina that my parents have. Like especially like 4th of July and stuff, and they had like 4th of July dresses on and stuff like that I never saw.
Oh.
Some I had on my phone, but that white dress I never, like they were, like she was going to church or something. I just never saw that white dress. And Bella's little dress that she had. Her little awkward smile there in the back. Yeah, that definitely got in my head when you get that.
When we had the picture out there for you? See, to us it didn't feel like that because we
I
really
didn't
didn't
show
elicit any emotion.
I don't show emotion that much. It's like my dad. It's like we don't show emotion. Like,
were you fighting it down, or were you just not a guy to show it?
I think that at this point it was too tempting for Chris Watts to tell them what he thought they wanted to hear. I think that, again, his need to be not judged and seen as a good guy comes to the surface here.
Like most of the time, I'm not a guy to show it. Like I hold it in as much as I can, and like in my cell, I cry a lot, obviously, but like I'm not really a guy to show it.
Okay.
I don't know. I try to hold it as much as I can.
Yeah, you were a difficult guy to read, especially at the house that day. That makes total sense now.
And now he goes back to thinking about what everyone else thinks of him and whether they're judging him, which is something that we've seen throughout his interviews as just really, really important to him to be seen in a good light.
Yeah, because I knew it was like, just because I was like in shock or just like disbelief, or just like some people said I looked like I was a heartless, no soul person, soulless person when they did like the TV interviews or something. And I'm just like, I'm just glad I never saw it. I don't even want to know what I looked like, what I sounded like.
Chris was talking about whether he thought it was real, the deaths of his family. And he mentions getting emotional, but getting emotional doesn't seem to have anything to do with the deaths of his family.
It's like in my head, it never registered.
Does it seem real now?
Oh, it feels real, like every day. Like I see pictures, I just know where they were at when they were doing that. When I first had like some type of hearing over the phone, and I heard Frank and Sandy and Frankie and them, they were on the phone. And I forgot what kind of hearing it was. Something about like a probate hearing or something. I knew exactly where they were in the back. I heard the birds chirp. I knew they were on the back deck. And I just walked back to my cell, just bawled my eyes out because I knew exactly where they were.
It seems to me to be about the lack of freedom he's now facing. That he can't go to where he used to be able to go to. And all the familiar places that he knew about, he'll never be able to go back to. So even though he's supposed to be talking about the deaths of his family, he's only able to show emotion and talk about showing emotion in a genuine way when it's about him and his own needs. Throughout this interview, Chris Watts' voice is quite sort of crackly and in my opinion, feigning emotion so that he can come across as somebody who is showing remorse and who's finding things difficult to talk about. I think when he does this, because it's not real for him, and because he doesn't feel emotional about these things, and because he's not somebody who's ever been able to empathise with people, he, just like the words he often uses, he uses a more extreme sort of emotion that just doesn't quite fit. It's a bit like in other videos when I've talked about the words he uses that can often be, he can often use phrases that are excessive and that don't fit with the situation. They don't make sense in the context in which he's talking. In the same way, the way that his voice sounds often just doesn't really fit.
And then more specifically, you text about how you would go out there and take care of it.
Yeah, I was going to take care of it for him because I've gone out there plenty of times.
Okay.
So I used, when another guy was out there, as far as another foreman, he showed me around out there like a year or so ago, and I just got familiar with the place, and I just whaled him out.
Okay.
I wasn't good at delegating stuff. I just used to just doing stuff on my own, or just taking care of it for somebody else.
Right.
I wasn't good at the whole hey, you go do this, you go do that, while I sit over here. Yeah.
Listen to the way he whispers as if to show emotion here.
Well, you see what it looks like to us,
It's
when it came up, we're
I know.
making plans to be out there, that day.
I know.
And here's another example of him whispering, where somebody who was genuinely showing this kind of emotion that he's trying to get across to us would have been crying, but he can't bring himself to cry because he doesn't feel upset. And so instead he has to fake it with a sort of whispery voice.
Those are my kids. This is my baby. I have to talk to them every night. I have to see how this can happen. Okay. Every time I see pictures of them, I don't know how this could have happened.
Chris Watts says something honest that really gives us some insight.
I know how many times the girls were back there, and it's just weird how emotion is processed differently for me than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like something like you said, if you lost your kids in the grocery store for 5 seconds, you'd be a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, it'd be like, I'd be panicked, but I probably wouldn't cry. I'd be like looking around trying to find them, but it's just like, it just process is different for me. I never knew why. Never know why.
When he says he'd be panicked, that could be true, that he'd be panicked because of Shanann and how angry she would have been with him that the children were missing. But any panic he would have felt wouldn't have been for the welfare of his children. My feeling is the only reason he mentions panic is to try to make himself sound more human.
I don't want to think I'm like a cold-hearted person. It's just a matter of just don't show it. Show the emotion as much as other people do. Even when, like, the girls left North Carolina, like, her chance brother, mom, and dad were all crying when they left. It's just kind of like, I never really saw my parents get like that when they left. It's kind of like, I don't know if it's like you're born that way.
Like your family doesn't show emotion like that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like, my dad couldn't really speak at the sentencing hearing because he said he was kind of like, he said he was going to lose it. Like lose his emotions. Like, that really hit me. It's kind of like I never seen him like that.
Like vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. But nobody really ever seen me that way either. I know I shouldn't really, take to heart what other people think about me so much. It's just a matter of like what God thinks about me, what He thinks, what His opinion is, not anybody else's.
What I think he's doing here is saying, you have no right to judge me. And he's said that many times throughout this interview. I think he also wants validation from the people interviewing him. I think he wants them to agree. I'm going to leave this here now. We've come to the end of this horrific story, and I think it's disturbed most of us. In other videos I talk about what happened when he was interviewed by the police and then after he was arrested. So that's the end of this interview analysis. I will be making other videos. There's one about Chris Watts's fan club and why women have been writing to him in jail. And there's going to be also a question and answer video. So I have lots of questions now to answer in that question and answer video. I've said this now a couple of times, but I'm going to say it one more time, which is just to look after yourselves, because obviously this is a really disturbing story, and just to watch how you're feeling and just take care. I also want to send love and very deep respect to the family of Shanann Watts, to her parents and to her brother, and not just from me, but I think on behalf of everyone. I know that people have so much empathy for what they're going through. I see it in so many comments, people really feeling for this family. So I want to pass that on from me and from all of you, and let's wish them peace, and as they come to terms with this, sending them our thoughts and our love. I think just feeling that love for them and thinking of them and caring about what they're going through, that in itself is going to affect all of us as well, for the good, So I'm going to leave it here. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video.